And welcome back to another episode of The Journey. I'm your host, Mr. Harris. Thank you for tuning in again. Today I wanted to focus and spend some time talking about this amazing organization, RYC, Renaissance Youth Center, but focusing more so on some of the challenges of getting started with your own nonprofit and some lessons that we may have learned. All right, so stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back.
Welcome to the Mr. Harris Show. 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 It's called The Journey.
Welcome back. So one of the first questions, I guess, that comes up is, why start your own nonprofit? When people call me up on the phone and say, hey, can I sit down with you? I want to have a conversation with you about starting my own nonprofit. The first thing I say is, why? Why you want to do that? It's a lot of work. And if you find someone who has like vision, right, like mission, then I think it's probably better that you kind of like stay in line with them or sign on with them to work underneath of another nonprofit, because we're going to talk a little bit today of how much work it is in terms of the involvement of getting it started. But the why, you should first ask yourself and say, hey, is this happening? Is it missing? All right. What am I doing different in my nonprofit than the next door neighbor nonprofit? All right. It's no different than when we ride around sometimes and we just see, and I know you've seen it as well, church after church after church. And sometimes you see them lined up, right? Storefront, storefront, storefront. And I know when you having service, you can hear them next door killing on the organ and killing on the drums. I always used to ask myself, well, why not knock down those walls and have a bigger church? Right? Have one service, one problem of making sure that we have oversight. So make sure that you're not in the way of your own vision and your dream. So make sure that you're not doing this just so you can say, I have my own, because it's such a huge undertaking to do. So the first thing is, why are you doing it? You're going back to the why, right? What is the needs? Like, what is it that you're going to be offering that is so different, is so unique, that's not happening in your community? And a lot of times it is necessary. We do need more people to have their own nonprofit, because there are things that are really, really missing in our community when we think about financial literacy, right? When we think about independent living skills, right? We have so many of our young people who are graduating high school, so on and so forth, can't do laundry, can't fry an egg, don't know how to mail a letter. So yes, are there needs out there? Absolutely. So first ask yourself why you're doing it. And if it's pure, and you're doing it because it's really a need for the community, then by all means, you should be starting your own nonprofit. All right? So let's talk about that a little bit, right? So the first question is why. And after the question why, I often like to talk about some of the challenges, at least some of the challenges that we had to meet here, right? It was a huge undertaking. Just think about this. If you start a for-profit business, right, you got to get a couple dollars lined up. You got to do a needs analysis to see who you're servicing and how you're going to create those incomes and how you're going to be sustainable, right? That's the basics of what you need to do for a nonprofit. It's a hot dog stand. I need hot dogs. I need rolls. I need some condiments, right? Ketchup, mayo, for those of us who don't know what that word means, right? I need a few of those types of things, get my business started. And you're off and going. Nonprofit doesn't work that way. You need liability insurance. You got to file a nonprofit status, which takes sometimes up to a year. You need to incorporate your organization. You have Department of Health requirements, and it's endless, those requirements. They're forever changing, right? You got to find space. Rent is very, very, very expensive. You have to create your own bylaws, policy and procedure manuals, right? Your website needs to be developed. Annual auditing. Now, the moment it was two brothers that started this nonprofit organization, Renaissance Youth Center. So can you imagine us getting, monies? And first thing was like, hey, where's the money and how is it being spent? And auditing is no joke. They want to make sure that you can be accountable for every penny that was raised, right? Your 990s have to be filed. It goes on. And I know you're not thinking about that. And here's the thing, right? When I first started doing this, I said, hey, you know what? I want to do something positive for the community. They're going to help me. I'm going to present myself. I've already been doing some great work for the borough. They're going to help me. This is going to be an easy raise, right? I'm just going to go speak to some folk in charge. They're going to help me out get a building. They're going to help me do these things so I can service more people. And I tell you, it could have been nothing further from the truth. So the first thing I want to challenge you to do, or suggest that you do, is that you reach out to people that can help, that can assist you, right? And so the first thing I did is reach out to counsel, lawyers, right? We need to find a lawyer. And you know what? I want to pause for the cause, and I want to give a big shout out to Joe Robillard and Howard Alter Rescue, right? When we were first starting this organization, it was a partner of mine, Mr. Q. Big shout out to you too, sir. Couldn't be here without you. We sat down and said, hey, we want to start our own nonprofit. And we started figuring out all these things. We ran into all those challenges that I just mentioned to you earlier. And I was like, man, bro, this is going to be tough. We're going to need some help. And there was a gentleman, and his son was attending a program that we were running, a basketball program. And got a chance to befriend him, told him what we wanted to do. He says, hey, well, sign me up. I will help you guys. And I tell you, without him, we would not be here today. And his name is Howard Alter Rescue. He went on to be chair of the board. He is still now a part of the board, helping to raise significant funding. His family is amazing. But in that same breath, I have to thank Joe Robillard. Joe Robillard, we were working with a young man who was playing on our basketball team. And Joe Robillard was sponsoring this young man through high school. And the high school student, Carlos, what's up, Carlos? Said, yo, there's a program I'm a part of, Renaissance. These guys are trying to expand. You should meet them. And we met him, told him what we were trying to do, told him how much money we needed to get started, and he wrote us a check the following week. So big ups to those. I mean, give them a hand clap. That could have done it without them. So we thank them for that, okay? So now, let's go back. You have the why you're doing this, right? The challenges that we talked about. So when you get together with your attorney or your lawyer or people of prominence in your community that can help you get through this, you want to make sure that you dot all of these I's that we just talked about a little bit earlier, right? You have to think about insurance. Insurance is very costly, right? And if you're occupying outside of your space, you have to have what is called an umbrella insurance policy. So now, for example, Renaissance, we occupy 35 different schools. So every school that we go into and we do a service, we need to make sure that we have liability insurance, that our staff are covered underneath that insurance policy. Please understand that is a cost factor. So in your budgeting, make sure that you put in for that, right? We already discussed filing for a nonprofit status is very time consuming, very costly. You also need to have a governing board. All right, so your board is a group of folk that you choose, you pick, and they oversee your organization, and they are also liable. So they help you come up with your bylaws. So anything that you do, whether it's your funding sources or the decisions that you make or anything that happens, you want to make sure that you include your board. So you want to have a good, diverse board that can help you. And don't just pick close friends. It's not going to help you in your time of trouble. You want to make sure that you pick people to understand finance, people to understand legal counsel, legalities, people to understand about putting together bylaws. You want to make sure that maybe you have somebody on your board who has an MSW, a Master in Social Works, if possible. Get that person on your board. If you're teaching something specific, let's just say that you're doing dance, maybe you can get a retired dance teacher who's been in the school system forever. Maybe that person has worked for a big dance company, so they're bringing their expertise and education around dance to serve on your board. There are a lot of people who don't mind giving back and doing those types of things, right? And there are even companies that will help you and assist you with that. Companies like Board Assist. Give them a call and say, hey, I'm looking for board members. These folk can help you with junior board and senior board members, right? So once again, filing your nonprofit status, getting incorporated, Department of Health, right? Now, we're in New York City. I guarantee it doesn't get any worse in New York City. New York City wants to come by and check everything from the water pressure to how hot and how cold the water is, how many sinks, how many toilets you have within your building, where the adults go into the restroom, where the kids go into the restroom, who has a SAC license, who's certified in professional rescuing, who's got their CPR training. It's endless. And that book is huge. So you want to make sure that you stay on top of that, your Department of Health, because they are the ones who can come in and shut you down. All right? So if you're not running, they come in for a site visit and something is out of order, you'll either get cited or they will close you down. All right? So make sure that you have time that you can check all that stuff out, right? And renting a space. I know what you're thinking. There's schools out there that have space. You're thinking that. I know. You're thinking about community centers like Renaissance. They have space for me. I know what you're thinking. It's just different, right? For example, here in the Bronx, there are very, very few brick and mortar nonprofit buildings left. So we are a brick and mortar building. We're a Renaissance Youth Center located here on 3485 3rd Avenue. In the area in which we live, there's not a lot of nonprofit organizations that rent or own their own building. It used to be. But you know why? It's very expensive. I don't know what the going rate is right now. You know, we caught a deal when we came in here 20 years ago with our landlord. But the going rate has got to be somewhere in the upwards of $50 to $60 a square foot. You do the math. We have about 30,000 square feet here at Renaissance Youth Center. We spend a lot of money for rent, right? So you have to definitely factor that in. Well, Mr. Harris, you just mentioned that schools, right? So here's the problem with schools. It used to be you can go ahead and get your filing of your nonprofit status. You can go into the local school and you fill out a slip to utilize the school space, the gymnasium, the auditorium. They have really cracked down. They have not said that they don't do it anymore, but they don't do it anymore. Understand what I'm saying? It's very, very difficult to utilize school space. So maybe you can go down to your local city council member and kind of talk about those types of things. They can advocate for you, but it's really, really difficult to get city school space, right? Places of worship have basements, all right? You can go and ask them, maybe you can utilize their space, all right? So there are some ways that you can kind of look at getting started, but just factor that in as a cost factor that space is going to be an issue for you, all right? Keep that in mind. But let me also say this. I was speaking with an organization a couple weeks ago, and they wanted to start up an organization. I said, hey, there's always outside, depending on what you're doing. They were a drum corps. I said, well, maybe you're like on the landscaper schedule, right? So springtime, you run your activities outside, and then in the wintertime, maybe you have to shut down or take that wintertime to do your homework to figure out where you can be on an indoor space. And here's the deal. Once you show that you're doing great work, you have a lot of parents, right? A lot of parents and young people involved. Those are constituents in the community who can advocate for you and the good work that you're doing. It's amazing how people can make things happen for you, all right? But that's a great way to get started, right? Cool. So we talked about renting a space, right? Creating bylaws, policies, and procedures. Yuck. That's work. I mean, like, well, what is your dress code? And how do you plan and prepare people for this emergency? And what is your policy for this? And what is your policy for that? It's a lot. Now, you can Google, right? And look up other people's policies and procedures. And that's what I suggest you do. Find out, get a template, but knowing that you're going to have to edit that to fit the lifestyle of what you do in your program, right? So don't look at that and be like, man, I can't do this. All of this is doable once you get the question why out the way. So if you understand that your why is this is necessary, this is needed, and this is a calling on your life to do this, all of this is doable, right? I guess I want you to understand this isn't a walk in the park, but it is definitely doable, right? Next on the list, we talked about 990s, right? You can Google anybody's 990. Anybody that's a nonprofit organization has to file how and what they did with the money, right? And you can actually see that online. Those who are philanthropists know this because that's what you look at before you make a donation. You want to make sure that that organization is in good financial standing before you make a contribution. That's called a 990, right? Website development. Could talk a whole lot about that, but we're not. There's tons of people that talk about website development, but that's just storytelling, right? And if I could give one piece of advice on this one, a lot of times in social development, we become like used car salesmen, I say, and that we say that we do a lot. Then when you get there, you don't see the evidence of that. What I would suggest is that say the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you. So if you say that in your program that you offer a diving, that kids can learn how to swim, there should be a pool in your center. Or you should show that you have access to a swimming pool, right? So tell the truth about what you do, all right? So on your website, you should show all of that. Annual auditing at the end of the year, you got to sit down with an auditor. It's also costly, but they're going to go through everything that you spent. And they're going to ask you questions on everything, every single check that you wrote, all right? So be forthcoming and know that that's coming. And on the bottom, I put yikes. Yikes mean this is just a lot. But you can do it. Just like we've been in operation now for 23 years. And I'm happy to say that it's been a very, 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 very rewarding experience, right? And so my last thing that I want to talk about, there was a list that came out of this whole process for me. We went through setting up, asking ourselves the why of the organization. Here are the challenges of starting Renaissance Youth Center and sustaining Renaissance Youth Center, right? But then there was these core values that came out. So my thing in closing would be, what are the lessons that I may have learned in this process? And I would say one of the bigger lessons that I've learned, besides having a level of stick-to-itiveness and never giving up and seeing it through, is I created core values later on in the organization. I wish I had created these core values in the beginning, because you can't do this without a good team. And so what the core values were able to define for me is, what qualities am I looking for in a teammate? Now, you should ask yourself this if you're doing any form of business. Forget about nonprofit or social development or academics. No matter what team you're developing, no matter what business you're going to do, you should ask yourself, what am I looking for in a quality of a person? And here are the 6 qualities Renaissance has. Number 1, we look for believers. We're looking for people that believe that change can happen, right? Can you imagine that you're putting together something and you're saying, hey, I'm going to do, I'm going to build this technology that will allow people to do blah, blah, blah. But the person on your team goes, man, we can't do that. This ain't never going to work. Where we going to get the money, right? Like, we wasting our time. That's a non-believer. Get that person out the room. I'm not talking about the naysayer. The naysayer and the non-believer are different. A naysayer to me is the person like, I don't think so. I don't think so. We can try. All right, well, there's a little bit of faith in that. All right, I'll take that one. But the person who just don't believe it can happen is always like the negative Nancy in the room. Bye-bye. All right, that's not what we're looking for to build a great team. So number 1, you need a believer. Number 2, the trailblazer. Now go back to the why. We said the why you're doing this. You're doing this quite often because it's not being done, which makes you a trailblazer, right? Here is a niche that's not being met. Here is a need that's not being met. That's where you come in. That's where your organization comes in. That's where your team comes in. But you need to have a group that doesn't just regurgitate a template. Well, this is what they're doing across the street. Or I read this is what they're doing down the road. No, it's probably not being done. That's the reason why you're doing it. So you want a group, or you want some people that are trailblazers. So number 1, believers. Number 2, trailblazers. Number 3, hard workers. Now, I often say that I outwork everybody. Yeah, that's what I believe. That's what I've seen. That's what I've experienced. But at least, try to keep up, You want somebody who's on a clock watcher. You want somebody who's is willing to put that time in to meet those deadlines, those goals, those short-term goals, so on and so forth. Hard work because they believe in what's happening, right? You want some hard workers on your team, all right? Relationships is number 4 for me, or number 4 for us, right? Building good, positive relationships. This doesn't work any other way. If you lived out here in the Bronx or New York City area, you would know we have great relationships with NYPD, partnerships with them, partnerships and great relationships with the Department of Probation, the DYCD we talked about, the DOE we talked about, and any other acronym you want to mention, right? We know everybody, and we're loved by everybody. Did he say everybody? Yeah, I said everybody. Everybody, right? So you got to have really good relationships because that's going to help you get this job done. And every now and then, you're going to need a favor. You're going to need somebody to put in some extra hard work from another organization to help you get your goals met, okay? Number 5 is passion, right? You want somebody who has the passion for what you're doing, not just for a job. You don't want somebody just there because, hey, this is a paycheck for me. It's something to do. You want somebody that, hey, just completes me. Just satisfies me. This is my calling. This is my stewardship for life, right? I believe in this servitude. I believe in what's happening. I'm passionate about this, right? And the last one is laughter. Yes. Listen, you're going to come in days and it's going to be rough. And every now and then you got to look across the room and you're going to need a good joke. You need a big smile from somebody. Laughter goes a long way. So I want people on the team that got a nice belly laugh, that can show some teeth and make us feel warm and bubbly inside. All right? So these are the things that I think that make Renaissance amazing. And for those of us, once again, in closing, who are thinking about doing their own nonprofit or looking at from the outside the work that Renaissance Youth Center is doing or other nonprofits are doing, this is the thing I want you to think about, right? Why are you doing it? Here's what you have to kind of go through to set it up and make it happen. And then who are you looking for to be a part of your team? Here's what I'm looking for in our next show, right? I want to start slowly just inviting people from our team to join us, all right? So we have so many different programs, and I can't wait to introduce the different programs, our young people, our teenagers, our staff, while still talking about the journey of the people that I meet in terms of my own relationships. All right? So cool. Thank you for tuning in and listening, and I hope some of this was helpful. And again, as always, in parting, make sure you love yourself. And whatever love you got left over, make sure you share it with somebody else. Deuces.
Welcome to the Mr. Harris Show. 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 It's called the Journey.